Well, I don't think there is a single silver bullet, but we do have to recognise that the vaccine is the best and safest route out of this crisis. And it's right that the government is making the investment and placing these orders with these vaccines so that we have a range of options. So we're one of the countries that's best placed as we come out of this pandemic to be able to offer a broad range of vaccines that are going to protect this country for the future.
How will you decide who gets priority access?
Well, the first stage will be obviously as critical, those critical workers, and there'll be a basis of assessment. But it's making sure that we have vaccines for the whole population. That's why the government has been investing on such a broad range of vaccines. We're seeing amazing developments at Oxford University and also Imperial, because those people who are leading vaccine research recognise it's really important to effectively spread the range of vaccines that you're going to be investing in to ensure that you have the very best vaccines available to the whole UK population. And in the UK, we have some of the best research and development anywhere in the world, but the government's even taking it a step further and making sure that we don't just have the best research and development anywhere in the world, but we also have some of the best manufacturing. And you're seeing that in the expansion of vaccine manufacture up in Livingston in Scotland, but also in Oxfordshire as well. Big investments that will prepare us and protect us for the future.
Got it. All well and good. Everybody has to use it in order or to be given the vaccine in order for it to be effective. A poll this morning saying 25% of the population may refuse this vaccine. If they do, then the effects will certainly be negated, won't they?
Well, what we've seen is that the British population are very good at recognising the importance of vaccines. I think that we've, both you and I will have had the experience of being vaccinated. Our children will have been vaccinated. I know my children have with MMR. And it is contingent on a very high proportion of the population taking these vaccines in order to be able to create the immunity across the whole of society. So it is a responsibility that I'm sure that the British people will recognise, because it's for their safety, it's for their good, and it's for the good of the wider society as well.
Just looking at some figures this morning, Secretary of State saying that more than 200,000 people could die from the impact of lockdown and protecting the NHS. Do you think that history will remember lockdown as the correct decision in the fight against COVID-19?
It was very much the right decision, incredibly tough decision to take. But what is important is that we start getting things back to normal at the very earliest stage. We've got to start bringing things back, whether that is seeing all schools returning in September, whether you're seeing businesses opening up their doors for the first time again. But all the way through this crisis, the NHS has done a magnificent job, not just in terms of supporting and helping those people who were suffering from coronavirus, but also keeping open their doors to ensure that they look after and support patients who are suffering from a whole range of different issues. And that's been incredibly important. But as we see more and more of society returning back to normal, it's right to do this in a careful and cautious way, but we do need to get people back.
I want to come back onto schools, but let me just finish on that point, if I may. 200,000 people, as I said, could die from the impact of lockdown. That's collateral damage that we're prepared to accept.
There's no collateral damage that anyone is prepared to accept. What we're doing is we're bringing society back. We're making sure that everything is working and running as we'd expect and want them to see, and we see that with schools returning fully in September. We see that in terms of shops and other sort of non-food retail all being able to open and people able to get on with their lives in a sensible and cautious way. But we are dealing with a global pandemic where many, many hundreds of thousands of people could have died as a result of it. And governments right across the world had to take difficult decisions. But I believe that history will judge those to have been the right decisions. But it's important to get services back up and running, making sure that services are working for everyone and making sure that there aren't, we do everything we can to minimise the long-term consequences of this pandemic.
Another couple of things to talk about, so let's crack on if we may. Talking about schools, you're telling us about lots more money for schools today. Is this new money or is this part of the plan you already announced in 2019?
So it was part of what we announced in last year, the Prime Minister's pledge to make sure that every primary school gets a minimum of £4,000 per pupil, every secondary school gets a minimum of £5,000 per pupil, and that's something that we're going to be achieving. Next year, we're going to see every primary school pupil bringing £4,000 per child to that primary school. For every secondary school, it's going to be a minimum of £5,150 per child, so over and above what the Prime Minister pledged. It was an extra £2.6 billion for this financial year. That's going to be increasing to 4.8, and it's all part of the government's plan to put more money into schools.
And schools back in August, September. What are you going to do if parents still keep their kids off school?
Well, we are making schools compulsory, and I think you'll appreciate how important that it is for all of our children to get them back into school.
So when you say compulsory, what happens if parents don't?
I didn't mean to talk across you.
I see what you did there. But my point is, what happens if parents don't send their kids back to school?
Well, we've made it clear that it is compulsory. Parents do need to be sending their children back to school. If ultimately they continue to ignore the fact that their children need to be in schools, if they continue to fail to work with the schools to get their children back, well then, at the most extreme level, they could be liable to a fine.
So if parents don't take their kids back to school at the start of the autumn term, they'll face a fine?
Well, I think you actually ignored the first bit of the answer to the question, that we'd ask schools to work very closely with those parents to encourage them and work with them to make sure that children are back in schools. Fines are only ever used as an absolute last resort. But you know and I know it's so important to get children back into schools. Children gain so much for being in school. They benefit from the inspiration of their teacher at the front of a classroom. They benefit from everything they are learning, but also being with their friends. And it's absolutely vital, not just for the child, but for society as a whole, that we make schooling compulsory. It's the bedrock of our future. And if we do not have compulsory education, it's something that we'll suffer from long term in the future. And I don't know about you, but I'm certainly looking forward to my children being able to have the opportunity to be back in school and be able to gain everything that they do from being in school.
OK. My child's 27, so unlikely. Let's talk about China. The Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy saying we should freeze the assets of Chinese nationals involved in the oppression, I should say, of the Uyghur Muslims. Would you support that?
Well, the government has made it clear in terms of its position, and the Foreign Secretary was very clear in his language yesterday on the Andrew Marr show. The Foreign Secretary will be making a statement later today, and it would be wrong for me to prejudge as to what he'll say in that.
So you don't have a view on the way that China's personally...
Well, I very much agree with what the Foreign Secretary said yesterday in terms of, the inappropriate way and the gross way that China has been dealing with Uyghur Muslims, and the Foreign Secretary will be making a statement in the House of Commons, and of course you'll appreciate that's absolutely the right place to be making such a statement. Yeah,
but I wonder what we can do as a nation to take on China. What do we have in our locker that we can use? Well,
Kay, I think you've already seen that Britain has never been nervous about raising its concerns with the People's Republic of China about human rights abuses. This is something that David Cameron did when he was Prime Minister. It was what Theresa May did when she was Prime Minister, and it's certainly what Boris Johnson does as Prime Minister. But we've also seen with Hong Kong, with what we believe is the infringement of the basic law, the fact that the government has been willing to take action, not just in speaking out against this, but also being able to offer British BNO holders a route to citizenship here in the United Kingdom, recognising our unique obligations to the territory of Hong Kong. And that's certainly something that sort of global leadership has led other nations such as Canada and Australia and other nations to actually make similar offers to the people of Hong Kong. And it's constantly taking that leadership forward, making it clear that when China acts in a way that we do not believe is acceptable, that we will speak out against that. But it is about a global coalition of nations acting together. And we want to work with China, and we always will want to work with China as an important player on the world stage. But we must always and will always speak out where we think they're doing things that are wrong.
Final thought before I let you go. You probably can't see this, but I've got my snood in my hand this morning. My question to you is, from Friday, do I need to wear this when I go to prep for a takeaway coffee and a sandwich? I spoke to the Health Secretary last week. He said, I do. Then Downing Street said that I don't. And then the Business Secretary, Alok Sharma, said at the end of last week that it depends. What's your understanding?
Well, my understanding, and my understanding is that you don't have to, but I think we've all got our face masks nowadays, and we are. I think the most responsible thing to do is, if you are going into Pret, don a face mask if you do have one available, and be responsible and use common sense at all stages.
Well, the Health Secretary said it's compulsory. He was wrong, yeah?
My understanding is that going into Pret, that it is encouraged, though it isn't officially that you absolutely got to.